Some people believe love begins the day you meet someone, but sometimes love begins long before that. Sometimes love waits. At just 4 years old, Ava stood in a doorway, clutching a stuffed rabbit to her chest. Her mother knelt before her, holding her tiny hands. "I have to go away for a little while," her mother whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm not leaving because I don't love you. I'm leaving because I love you enough to build a future for you." Her father kissed the top of her head. "We'll come back, baby. We just need a little time." They were unknown gospel singers. More faith than money, more dreams than certainty. Every invitation to sing meant another city, another church, another chance to keep their calling alive. They believed God had opened a door they couldn't afford to close. So, Ava stayed with her Aunt Ruth, her father's older sister. What was supposed to be a few months slowly became years. At first, the phone calls came every night. Her mother's voice warm through the static, her father singing her a lullaby from a motel room hundreds of miles away. Then the calls came every week. Then, whenever they could. Not because they forgot, because life kept pulling them from one stage to another. One revival to the next, one recording session after another. And Ava learned something no child should have to learn. She learned to stop crying on the phone, because when she cried, her mother cried. And when her mother cried, her father wanted to come home. And coming home meant closing the door God had opened. So Ava learned to smile into the receiver, to say, "I'm fine, Mama. I'm doing great." She learned to protect her parents from the weight of missing her. Meanwhile, their music reached thousands, then millions. Albums climbed the gospel charts. Their songs became anthems, sung of churches across the country. People everywhere knew their voices. Almost no one knew the price they had paid. But Ava wasn't living in luxury, she was living in love. Aunt Ruth didn't have much. The house was old, the floors creaked under every step. Some months, the bills won the war before payday arrived. Ruth would sit at the kitchen table after Ava was asleep, folding the same stack of envelopes, choosing between the electric and the groceries, but never letting a single worry reach the little girl's ears. Every morning, there was prayer. Every evening, there was dinner on the table. Every night, there was laughter. Aunt Ruth never tried to replace Ava's parents. She simply made sure the little girl never once questioned whether she was loved. And on the nights when Ava lay awake missing her mother, Ruth would sit on the edge of the bed, stroke her hair, and whisper, "Love isn't about being in the same room, baby. Love is about never being forgotten." By the time Ava reached high school, she had become the kind of girl who smiled at strangers, who volunteered everywhere, who believed everyone deserved kindness. That's where she met Elijah. He wasn't the loudest boy in school, he wasn't the most popular, but he noticed things. He noticed when she skipped lunch so another student could eat. He noticed how she stayed after class, helping teachers clean. He noticed she never spoke badly about anyone. One rainy afternoon, he quietly held out his umbrella. "You'll get soaked," he said. "What about you?" "I'll be fine." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled. "No, we'll share." And neither of them realized they had just begun the rest of their lives. They grew together. Football games, school dances, late-night phone calls that lasted until one of them fell asleep. Church youth services on Wednesday nights, studying for exams side by side, lying beneath the stars, dreaming out loud. When Elijah talked about the future, Ava was always in it. When Ava imagined home, it always looked like wherever Elijah was standing. Their love wasn't loud. It was steady, the kind that grows quietly, until one day you realize it has become part of your heartbeat. Years passed. Ava graduated college. Elijah became a teacher. Together, they built a simple life. A tiny house with a porch. Sunday mornings in church. Friday pizza nights. Coffee together before the sun came up. Nothing extravagant, everything meaningful. Then, one ordinary Tuesday, a black SUV pulled up outside Aunt Ruth's home. Two familiar faces stepped out. Older now, more wrinkles, more gray hair. The entire world knew them as award-winning gospel artists. But in that moment, they weren't celebrities. They were simply parents, standing on a porch, terrified it was already too late. Would she recognize them? Would she call them mom and dad? Or, after all these years, would she call them strangers? Ava opened the door. For a moment, silence filled the room. A silence that held 20 years of missing. Her mother broke first. She fell to her knees, took Ava's hands, and whispered through a flood of tears, "I have imagined this moment every single day." Her father couldn't even speak. He simply wrapped his daughter in his arms and held her the way you hold something you're terrified will disappear again. No cameras, no audience, no stage lights. Just years of longing collapsing into a single embrace. That evening, they explained everything. The sacrifices, the missed birthdays, the nights they sang about hope while their own hearts were breaking. The promises they had whispered to each other on dark tour buses that one day they would finally come home. They had earned enough to retire, enough to provide for generations, enough to keep the promise they had made to a little girl standing in a doorway years ago. But they were afraid, so afraid. Would she forgive them? Ava looked across the room at Aunt Ruth, the woman who had been there every single day. Then she looked back at her parents. "I never felt abandoned," she said softly. "I always knew I was loved." A pause. "You were building something bigger than yourselves, and Aunt Ruth made sure I never felt alone." Her mother cried harder. Her father simply held her hand and thanked God. The next Sunday, for the first time in years, the entire family sat together in one church pew. And after the service, Elijah knelt in front of everyone. "Ava," he said, "you've been my best friend since we were teenagers. You've taught me that love isn't measured by time, it's measured by faithfulness. So, today, I want to spend every tomorrow with you." He opened a small velvet box. Inside was the simplest ring she had ever seen, and somehow it sparkled brighter than diamonds. "Will you marry me?" With tears streaming down her face, she whispered, "I've been saying yes in my heart for years." Their wedding wasn't extravagant. Wildflowers lined the aisle, family filled every pew. Aunt Ruth walked Ava halfway down. Her father walked her the other half, because both of them had carried her to this moment. As Ava reached the altar, she looked back one last time. 3 people had taught her what love looked like. A mother who sacrificed, a father who kept believing, an aunt who showed up every single day. And waiting at the end of the aisle was the man who had chosen her again and again without ever asking her to become someone else. Years later, when people asked Ava how she found a love that lasted, she never talked about fairy tales. She simply smiled. Real love isn't the absence of waiting. It's choosing each other through every season until the waiting itself becomes a testimony. Because sometimes the greatest love stories aren't written in perfect timing. They're written by faithful hearts. And those stories never go out of style.